Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Any scary or weird anecdotes about hotels? They are inherently creepy to me, especially the cheap corporate ones. It's like they have a thin gloss covering the grime or possibly something sinister. Anyways, feel free to post stories or pics.
I stayed in PIC-related in Mexico for a few weeks when I was working remotely. On 2 occasions I had my door knock a few times in the night, very softly. When I went to check the peephole I would see nothing. The first time it went away, but the second time there was one final knock that shook the door. Weirdest thing was that it felt as if the knock was coming from the bottom of the door rather than the middle or top, where you'd normally expect a knock.
We had old family friends that opened a big old hotel or motel. I never went to see it, but it was pretty old and cheap. They told us stories of the people who'd checked in and took their own lives. They made it sound like every room had this happen at least once. Sometimes the guests were long-term before doing it. One guy like that hadn't paid on the first of the month and they hadn't seen him in a few days, so they accessed his room but saw nothing out of the ordinary. Family friend's maintenance man was checking the bathroom and came out. He's in there, but he's not going to pay. Guy had slit his wrists in the tub and it was a complete mess. They could tell a potential death on sight, especially with no luggage, so they'd assign the same set of shit rooms to these people.
As a paramedic, I've responded to countless. Well over a couple dozen I'd say, dead on arrival, located inside hotel and motel rooms. Usually it's a person surrounded by bottles or cans of alcohol, and almost always they shit themselves and the smell is vile. They seem to either be in poor health and just succumb to death, or it's obvious they fell, hit their head, and died by brain bleed.
I worked in a corporate one for 2 years, separated by a brief stint in the mental hospital simply because the guest service aspect of the job triggered severe paranoia. Like this anon said, it was a very liminal space, especially during the night shift. The elevators often open and close on their own to keep airflow moving. And one time, I swear to God, some days, it seemed rooms would just disappear into the walls and nobody would bat an eye. Thank you for your service, anon. This was my worst fear, being alone on shift. How to explain the sheer terror you feel when you see a human being with what looks like an unhinged look in their eye, a washing bag, a 24-pack of Coors Light, and a shotgun, checking in at 1 in the morning. I quit when I started to realize that at any point, a guest could die in a room, and I would be the only person available upon that initial discovery. That wait was too much and not worth the disrespect. PIC-related is the hotel I worked at.
Holy shit, anon, I had never thought about it from your perspective before, and how tortuous that helpless feeling would be, to see and know WTF they're gonna do and literally not being able to do anything to prevent it. I may begin feeling complicit. That's traumatic as hell and screws with me more than any dead body I've come across as a medic.
Thank you for saying that, anon. You helped me more than you know today. I was carrying more trauma over that job than I realized. I feel like I'm the lucky one for never having to have witnessed the bloody aftermath, and send only good vibes your way today. Only the lead-up contributed to the complicit feeling at times, because when the thoughts hit, it began to feel like I was merely a steward walking them home. And from my side, it was like witnessing the final moments of their destruction as opposed to the creation of their ending. Luckily, I never had a death on my watch other than what the arithmetic sequence problem solving of esoteric rhetoric and Midwestern thinking showed me, and honing the metaphysical thinking was able to save me from the nightmare. In those moments, it was because witnessing their destruction in those cases was a form of creation in its own right. But I think it's the service routine and prejudice distorting vision. If it weren't for men like you on your end, I sometimes felt I wouldn't have been here all right on the other side. Each man thinks his own horizon is the limit of the world, and in those final moments, they don't even think about me, the front desk guy, whose job it is to pass the key into their hands, simply because I needed the corporation's meager paychecks to survive.
The first nightmare I remember as a child was in a shitty chain hotel in a town full of meth addicts who would do dumb shit like get stuck inside of sewer drains. A prostitute was discovered near the train tracks in a shopping cart missing their face. Very dark vibes, and even as an adult I hated going by that place. Anyway, I was stuck in a Motel 6 clone with my alcoholic father and his drunk friend who tried to instigate a race war with the other guests while my father was in his underwear in the room of another man who had AM 1911 pistol on the nightstand and while extremely intoxicated tried to show me, actually convincing, pics he claimed he took of Bigfoot. The other guest then tripped and hit his head on a dresser and passed out on the floor, only awakening to make threatening statements to me. This was in a fairly infamous town in the American Southwest. At check-in, a man clearly in the grips of stimulant psychosis tried to sell us power tools, and when we left at checkout another guest was being taken away in an ambulance, and the entire night a klaxon alarm from a store nearby was triggered, flashing a strobe light into our room every 30 seconds. The manager tried to scam us for more money too, and Yelp reviews showed he did this with all his guests. Fun times. I didn't sleep that night.
I had something happen at a hotel once. Short backstory: I grew up out in the backwoods. Civilization was 45-minute drive and the family didn't get out much, so I remember being very young and always enjoying the experience of hotels. I had a little more freedom there to walk around alone, and there was usually stuff to do and people to see, unlike out in the country. So anyways, one year we had a vacation at Disney World in Orlando. We couldn't afford a Disney hotel, but we had a pretty decent chain hotel like Holiday Inn or something. Multiple stories, indoor pool, lots of hallways, but everything's cheap plastic, you get the picture. So here's what happened. It's the first night at the hotel. After walking the theme park all day, I'm just excited to walk around the empty hotel at night. It's around midnight. Parents are asleep, it's time to go lurking. Most of night is pretty slow. I walk down to the indoor pool, no one's there. I see some older kids hanging in the lobby, too shy to go hang out, so I keep walking. Walk past hotel bar, it's closed but there's a tiny selection of arcade games adjacent to the entry. Played some Hydro Thunder, things are going well. I start to get tired and hungry. I check my watch, holy crap, it's already past 2 a.m, time to head back. Head to elevator, push button for my floor. I walk around floor my room is on, something feels off, start to realize everything looks similar but I feel like the layout of the hallway is different or something. Figure I must have hit the wrong button, I'll just make my way back to the elevator. Something in the back of my head tells me to keep going forward, to look for elevator, not to backtrack. I've been walking down the hallways for 10 or 15 minutes, made multiple right turns. Okay, this is stupid, I'm being stubborn, I'll just turn around and go back the way I came. As soon as I turn around, the hair stands up on the back of my neck. I'm looking down empty hallway, there's nothing there at all. Screw this, I turn around and go forward again. Finally see sign on ceiling with an arrow underneath pointing towards elevator. Feeling really silly that I essentially got frightened for being on the wrong floor. Head down the hallway, the arrow is pointing down. I've been walking for another few minutes, where is this elevator? Hair stands up on back of neck again, I hear a sound behind me like stumbling on carpet. I turn around. Nothing there. Wait a minute. A head pops up from around corner. It's small, hairy, has glassy red eyes. I freak out, panic, and start banging on first hotel door I see. To my absolute shock, my dad answers the door. I'm at my hotel room. Dad isn't too happy, tells me to explain. After telling him whole story, he's upset. He thinks a Florida crackhead tried to kidnap me. Calls hotel security. They are adamant there was nothing else in the hallway with me. And that was the end of that. Safe to say I never thought of hotels as a magical place again.
I had a friend who worked at La Quinta Inn. Pretty sure they have them all over. They're not too big here, but they're around. Anyway, several years back, we were going to get hit by a hurricane and most of the city was evacuating. I left early, but the hotel stayed open till the last minute and they scheduled my pal till nearly the last night. So he's working the night shift. Reception, or whatever it's called. Front desk. He's dicking around on his phone when he looks up and sees the parking lot flooded with lights. Clearly it was a bunch of cars with their high beams on or something. Friend figured some evacuees decided the traffic was too bad and hopped off the freeway. The hotel was right next to it. Thing was, the parking lot had been totally empty all night. He could see it the whole time from where he sat. So he gets up and walks outside, confused. He said between the time he saw the headlights and then walked around the front desk to the front door, the parking lot was completely dark again. No lights. No cars. He said he got hit by a wave of goosebumps. Was almost afraid to move. Just stayed there with his head sticking out the door for a sec, watching the traffic on the freeway. He decided to take it as an omen and told his boss he was going to have to evacuate early and couldn't make his next shift. There's no real ending. Nothing ever happened. The place he was staying at didn't even get flooded. but the way he tells that story always spooks the shit out of me.
When I was in Vegas, I went to a big chain hotel, but I can't remember what. It was kind of a hole-in-the-wall sort of place. While there, I had a dream about the housekeepers being kept as slaves and paid with drugs, and they lived in the basement of that or a nearby hotel. Another hotel I stayed at was called the Quinta Inn and was not a big chain hotel. It just had a name similar to a big name hotel. The guy who ran the place told me that they had a free breakfast and to circle the breakfast I wanted and they'd bring it. Then in the morning, a pitiful young woman came to the door with a stale croissant and a pitiful little glass of grape juice. I wondered if she was really a prostitute and it was all a code based on what I ordered.
On September 25, 2015, I was at the Mutual UFO Network Symposium in Irvine, California, staying at the hotel where it was being held. We have just finished the banquet. A few of us were sitting in the lounge talking and enjoying a drink. I ordered a beer but only drank a couple sips of it and did not have any more to drink that evening. The DJ who played music and a group of us started dancing. Around 11 p.m. I went to my hotel room because I was attending a workshop early the next morning and wanted to be well rested. I went into my hotel room and the person I was sharing it with was already in bed. I fell asleep quickly. Around approximately midnight I was woken up and felt like I was floating out of the hotel room. I remembered standing outside of the hotel room on the rooftop looking back into the window at my roommate laying in bed. Inside the room with him I could see 3 gray aliens standing by his bed holding his leg and giving him some sort of an injection. I was pounding on the window yelling for him to wake up. I also was trying to find a way back into the hotel. When they were done working with my roommate, they came back out to the rooftop where I was, and then I noticed the large cigar-shaped craft hovering above the hotel. I knew they were going to take me on board, but I did not want to go without C coming with me. I begged for the Grays to let me take C with, because I wanted him to be there so that he would remember this happening as well. I did not want this to just be my memory. I had also asked because I was afraid and wanted C to be there and help talk me through this experience. C was then removed from his hotel room as well. At least 7 other people were also removed from the hotel and boarded onto the cigar-shaped craft. On board, all of us were placed in chairs which resembled beauty salon chairs with hairdryers above them. We were all restrained in the chairs, and the parts that looked like a hairdryer were placed over each one of our heads, and it fit very snugly. I was placed in a slightly separate chair from everybody else. I was also restrained, but they placed more sensors on me than they had used on the others present. I was afraid at this point of what was going to happen and begged for C to be brought over by me and help me to relax. C was brought over to me and I could tell that he was still sleeping, but they made him talk to me, which helped me to relax. Then they started the procedure on all of us. It reminded me of a milking parlor, but only it was a milking of the mind rather than anything sexual taking place. The machine and sensors that I was hooked up to were hooked up to the other people who had been taken. There were a couple of benefactors as well as some people higher up in the Mutual UFO Network. It seems like they were taking their information and copying it from the other people. When they were done with that, then I was made or told to remember my experiences and what I knew, and that information was downloaded to the other people. It was as if they needed to know what I knew for some reason. None of us were injured in any way. I do remember at one point during the procedure, blood samples were taken from each of us for some reason. There were approximately 20 or more alien beings on board the craft in the room with us as the procedure was being done. When all of the information had been gathered and procedures were done, I was put to sleep and we were all returned to our hotel rooms. At one point on Saturday the 26th, I was sitting in a seminar and had a memory flashback. I borrowed a black light from C and went up to my hotel room. My roommate was in the room watching TV and resting his leg. I asked him if he remembered anything happening last night. He told me that he slept like the dead and he felt very well rested but remembered nothing. I then looked at his left leg and noticed a red round mark about the size of a quarter. There were also what appeared to be bruises next to the mark. I then used the black light on my pajamas and my bed and various parts of the hotel room. Then he used the black light on my roommate's leg. I became slightly afraid and called C on my phone and handed it to my roommate. He told C to come up to the room. C came up to the hotel room to find out what was going on. I told him what I remembered happening, then showed him my roommate's leg as well as my pajamas. We then checked the hotel room with the black light and tried to photograph various parts of the hotel room as well as the mark and bruises on my roommate's leg. I began to panic and left the hotel room to go get some fresh air and clear my head. Seeing my roommate's leg made the experience more real than I was ready for. I went for a long walk out by the pool, then gathered myself enough to go back to the seminar and try to forget the night before as well as the mark on my roommate's leg.
I traveled to Galena, Illinois on business in early May 2011. My employer booked me into the DeSoto Hotel, which is a beautifully restored 19th century building with, what I found out later, a lot of history. The day I arrived, I checked in and decided to spend the rest of the evening in my room. I was very tired after the long drive from St. Louis. I ordered room service, ate, watched some TV, then went to bed. A few hours into my sleep, I was startled by what sounded like an argument in the hallway. It lasted a few minutes, then eventually stopped. I quickly went back to sleep. Not long after, I was again startled by loud talking from the hallway. I looked at the clock. It was 2:10 a.m. I didn't want to get involved, but I needed to sleep, so I called the front desk and reported the noise. The rest of the night was uneventful and quiet. In the morning, I went to the front desk and inquired about the ruckus in the hallway and if someone had checked it out. The lady at the desk checked, but there was no note of me calling. I didn't think anything of it because the noise had stopped and I did sleep well afterwards. After a long day, that's another story, I returned to the hotel and decided to stay in my room that evening. I had a long drive home the next day and needed plenty of rest. I was laying in bed watching TV when I started to smell something burning. It was the distinct odor of cigars, and it was very strong. Tobacco smoke really bothers me, and this smell was overpowering, though I didn't see any smoke. I called the front desk and complained that someone was smoking in one of the rooms. The clerk assured me that someone would check it out. After a while, the odor started to dissipate, but I felt sick to my stomach because of it. Since I wasn't going to be able to sleep while nauseous, I decided to do some paperwork before I laid down for the night. As I sat on the bed reading a report, I noticed the sound of heavy footsteps that seemed to go back and forth in the room. I also heard what sounded like men talking and laughing. I was definitely spooked by this time. I had never experienced anything like this. I tried to ignore it, but it would get quiet, then suddenly start back up again. Eventually, the noises stopped, so I decided it was time to go to sleep. I dozed off very quickly and was sound asleep. That was until I heard what I thought was a door slamming shut. I almost jumped out of my skin. It was deafening. I sat up in the bed dazed and confused, as well as half asleep. I looked around the room, then I noticed something very odd. In front of the window, there was a tall dark shadow in the shape of a large man with a large brimmed hat that was rocking back and forth. There was also a red glow that looked like it was puffing on a cigar. The strong smell of cigar smoke started to fill the room, and I felt like I was going to choke. I was mortified by this phantom, but I tried to keep as calm as possible. After a minute or so, the shadow and the smell simply faded off. The rest of the night was very quiet. I left the next morning without telling anyone in the hotel of the experience, though I did find out later that the hotel does have a history of paranormal activity. I had never really had an inclination for the paranormal, but I'll make sure that any future reservations are made at spook-free accommodations.
Several years back, this experience took place in Tucumcari, New Mexico. My mother, my best friend, and I were headed down to Arizona from Minnesota to go to my grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary, and we happened to be going through Tucumcari, New Mexico. It was very late at night. We were tired and we decided to settle in. We found a hotel. Most of the hotels we saw had no vacancies. We happened to see this hotel. It was a little bit run down, but it had a vacancy sign, and we decided we were going to stop, so we did. We did stop and we walked in. A woman dressed in a long black dress similar to Morticia on the Addams Family came up to the counter. She said that she had a room, and so we paid for the room. It cost us $45 for the room, which we thought was strange, but we were willing to pay the fee and go to sleep. So we went to the room. Got inside. We realized the door was locked on the outside door, so we pushed. There was an older dresser. Everything in the room was very old. We pushed an older dresser up against the door to lock it out. Then we all showered and decided we'd go to sleep. There were 2 rooms. There was a front room and there was a little back bedroom. And then a bathroom off to the side. All of the rooms had those wrought iron beds in them. And when we sat down in the room in the back, there was an old black and white TV with rabbit ears on top. And we sat down on the bed, and all of a sudden the bed started to jump when we were sitting on it. So we got off and were trying to figure out what was going on. It actually came up off the ground. It wasn't very far, but we could feel it. And then the rabbit ears started moving on top of the TV, and we heard some snoring. It sounded like it was right there in the bedroom. And we kept thinking, well, there's no room next to us, so what's going on here? My mother, being the silly woman that she is, thought that the woman was trying to push us out of the room, and so she started digging around trying to find wires, under the bed and around everywhere, but we couldn't find anything. This happened around 10 to 15 minutes, then all of a sudden this terrible smell like a dead animal just filled the room. So we got out of the room, into the other room, and we sat at the bed there and we jumped on it and we did everything we could and nothing happened. We went back to the other room and there was no more jumping, but yet the smell was pretty bad. So we finally decided we were not going to be able to sleep there that night and we left. Well, the strange part was we went on down to Arizona. We went to the 50th anniversary and then we went back the same direction. We decided we were going to check the hotel during the day, so we drove over to the area where the hotel was and all there was an empty lot. But there was a gas station next to where the hotel had been. So we walked in and we were talking to the guy inside and we said, "What happened to the hotel that was there? We know it was there just like 2 days ago." He goes, "Oh, no. There hasn't been a hotel there for 25 years. And we said, "No. No. No. There had to be a hotel there because we were gonna sleep in it, but we couldn't because of these strange events that happened to us while we were in there." And he goes, "Oh, a lot of people say that, but that hotel hasn't been there for 25 years. It burned down and a guy was burnt in one of the rooms, so that's why it got, bulldozed." And I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense because we were actually in it. And so, to this day, we know that we were actually in this hotel and we had these really strange kinds of things going on. But the hotel was totally gone when we went there 3 days later. The other thing I wanted to tell you was that I'm a doctor of psychology. I'm a psychologist and I was teaching some college courses in psychology, and I happened to teach in Monona, an Indian college there, and I was relaying my experience in relation to extrasensory perception and different things we can't explain. And when I got done with one of my classes, one of the semesters, this young man walked up to me and he said, "Dr. Carroll," he said, "I just want to tell you that, and this may sound strange, but when you were relating your experience I was sitting thinking, oh my God, that's exactly what our uncle had told us about an experience he had when he was down in Tucumcari, New Mexico. He stayed at a place that totally wasn't there. And we used to think he was a little bit on the quacky side, so we didn't believe him. He said, now I can believe that he might have actually had that experience. He said, I have the utmost respect for you and I really believe you. And to this day, I have people who think that we're a little daft when we try to tell them the story, but I lived it. I know that it happened. To this day I realize that there are probably extra levels of time, and for some reason we got warped into that night, and according to that guy it was like around the anniversary of when that hotel burned down or whatever happened.
5th grade. Dad leaves my mom just before my birthday, October 30th. Oh, it's my fault. MP4. Spiral into depression. Mom, God bless her, tries everything to make me feel better. Starts teaching me to bake cookies. I was a cookie fanatic at that age. This starts a tradition of me and Mom baking cookies for Santa every year together. Fast forward. 7th grade. Don't believe in Santa anymore. We still bake cookies every Christmas for Santa though. This particular year Mom lost her second job, so I already knew I wasn't getting anything. But we bake cookies anyway. Mom is clearly stressed about something though, probably money. Pauses to rest her eyes halfway through. Falls asleep on the couch. I finish everything by myself like a big boy. Set a couple of cookies on a plate, pour a glass of milk. Leave everything on the table. Suddenly I thought, Santa, if you're real, please help my mom so she won't leave me, too, thank you. Sleep. That night, wake up to the sound of someone opening my door. Turn over in bed. Door is wide open. See Christmas lights blinking in the hall even though we didn't decorate. Slip out of bed. Find apartment totally dark. Mom still asleep on the couch. That's weird. As I go back to my room, I pass the kitchen table and find the cookies and milk gone. Think, oh, it must have been Santa, cool. Go to bed. The next day, my mom's friend calls up Mom and tells her there's a new opening for an entry-level something or other. They need someone ASAP. Is she willing to work Christmas? She kisses me goodbye as she races out the door. And the rest is history. Not saying it was actually Santa. But that was nearly 2 decades ago and things improved almost overnight. Talked to Mom earlier on the phone. She's well, and I just got done baking some cookies with my own little munchkin. Merry Christmas, everyone.
be me. July-ish 2004. On vacation in the Outer Banks, chilling with family at Jockey's Ridge. Giant sand dune, looks like Tatooine. I get bored of staring at sand all day, so wander off. Come across this small pond with reeds and cattails and shit coming out of the sand. Feels like an oasis. I sat down and drew little ducks in the sand. I really like ducks. Hear rustling from the reeds across the pond. I look up and there's a small woman in a teal button-up and jeans looking at me from the reeds. Couldn't be more than 48. Looked 48 in the face, but a good 48. I was too young to not know this was weird. She wades across the oasis and offers to join me. I can't recall much, but it felt like one of those kids you'd meet in a McDonald's play place and never see again. Notice her eyes are big and unblinking, like giant almonds. She takes a reed and bends it into the shape of a duck in like 5 seconds. Blows my mind. She teaches me to do it and we begin playing with the ducks in the water. Vividly recall the ducks moving around on their own. Not quacking or actually being alive, just moving together in complex ways. Eventually a fat man in a Hawaiian shirt and cargo shorts with a big white beard comes over. Here he is, he calls out. I look up in confusion. Woman gone. Mom scoops me up, sobbing. Was gone for 3 hours. Nobody could find us, thought I was abducted. Parents thank the man profusely. We exchange a glance, he winks. I'm so confused that all I can do is bawl. He comes closer, I cry harder. Says something to my dad, hands him something and whispers. I got nervous and scared whenever I saw Santa in anything afterwards. Even commercials, especially at the mall. That winter, saw something strange in the Christmas tree. Reach in and grab it. It's a duck made of reeds. Better than any of the ones I could make. Feel weirdly contented. Told all the kids at school Santa was my best friend. They make fun of me. Still leave out milk and cookies.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel, as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.
Remember to check out the Odyssey page in the description for a second archive of the channel's videos.